Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, one of the first generative AI companies that I formed pre-transformer models back in 2016. My partner in that was David Yang. We believe that GSD, that intellectual capacity is evenly spread, but opportunities are not. And today, thanks for joining Top Global Startups. And I'd like to introduce you to James Macnaghten, who's the CEO of Caldera. He is developed a company that's a heat battery company. He's an innovator who's passionately working to decarbonize industrial heat with groundbreaking thermal energy storage technology. He's a Cambridge-trained engineer, prolific inventor, and experienced entrepreneur dedicated to solving the world's toughest energy challenges. So with that, I'd like to welcome James. Hey, James.
Hey, Gary. Nice to be on your show.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So, you've had quite a journey from Cambridge and being an engineer to a successful entrepreneur across tourism and energy sectors. Can you share a little bit about your path and how it shaped your approach to entrepreneurship?
So I started entrepreneurship very young. So I did not complete my final year at Cambridge University. I started my first company. I started a number of businesses over the years, and the Cambridge business I still own it. I'm the main shareholder, and it's probably the largest tourism business in Cambridge. In my 30s, I got back into engineering because it's my absolute passion. And I kind of got involved in a company doing thermal storage where it was called isentropic, and we were trying to convert electricity into heat, and then you convert it back to electricity. And at this time, lithium ion batteries were really expensive, like $1,000 a kilowatt hour plus. And we used rock as our thermal storage material. So the principle was it was cheap, low cost materials. So that was in about 2008. And we got about 8 years in. And what happened is at the same time lithium ion dropped in cost, a lot of our early assumptions, and I sort of have this general view about a lot of mechanical and physical systems now, everything got more expensive. So in 2015, our investors decided we weren't commercial, and I completely agreed with their assessment, and the company wound up. So, it was very painful. We raised quite a lot of money, and I definitely don't want to do that again. So fast forward then to 2017, we had an idea for a thermal storage material, which would have been much better in the earlier company. And having done this thing once, you sort of see where all the pitfalls are. And we founded Caldera, and we basically started building thermal storage at really quite small scale, grown the company, and we've recently just done a Series A round where we've got a large German strategic investor in, and the company's now got about 27 people. So
how big was your round this time, James?
It was 10 million sterling, so in US dollars, 13, 14 million. And for Europe, for a hardware company, it's a lot tougher. We were discussing earlier, but it's a lot tougher to raise money in Europe for hardware-based companies. And I would say it's got a lot tougher as well over the last 2 or 3 years. So we're really pleased to have done both the round, and we really like our partner.
No, that's fantastic. Why is it tougher, by the way? Because I hear that from yesterday. I had a company from Austria that I talked to. I hear it across the board. Why is Europe so much different? And why is one of the valuations less in general? And why are the amount of money that they invest so much less in general?
I would say so. I would say about a lot of the funds, the venture funds, I think, are struggling to sell companies for the multiples they wanted. The LPs are not getting their funds back. They're saying there's no rush to invest. It's fine if you take a bit longer. And because they're holding on to companies longer, they need more of their own money to reinvest into these. So I think there is a general shortfall. I think
Mhm.
certain sectors are taking the majority of the investment. I'd say AI is seems to me where it's the one area I think it's very easy to raise money. And historically, clean tech hardware-based companies have been pretty. I'd say it's a long play. Everyone's always concerned about capital intensity and time to market. So that's my sort of general view. I would then go further and say we've spoken to some US VCs, and we had quite what we felt was a very ambitious plan. And
Mhm.
the response was, you need to add a factor of 10 to your sales number within 5, 6 years. Now, partly I don't understand how it works, because I could say we do that. You raise the money, but I know we aren't going to hit the targets. So I see a lot of probably US competitors in our space raising much bigger sums of money, but I'm not convinced it works with hardware companies. But we'll see. I mean, it could be I would say old in the tooth. I've been around the block, and I wasn't going to go and promise things I didn't think we could deliver. But I don't quite understand, and it's your world. I don't quite understand, why the companies can get what I would say are very, very large valuations, when to me it doesn't necessarily make sense when you look at the development path.
The one thing that happens in Silicon Valley, there's really three things that are critically important, right? And, having raised money in the UK and Germany, living in Russia, the Ukraine, sometime, what I can say is there's three things: operational expertise, access to capital, and networking contacts. And the one thing about Silicon Valley is a port to the rest of the world, James. It allows you to come in. It's where money comes in. It's where incredible companies come in, and their valuation's higher because people get it, right? They understand it. So they're not just, walking the walk. They're talking the talk. They're deeply inside of it. And so what happens is it allows you to cut through the crap a lot faster than you normally would. And then the other thing is, I remember when I was raising money over in the UK, it was a lot of talk and not a lot of action, right? For me personally, in my company, this is one of the first e-commerce consulting companies. And so I think that part of the challenge is, you have people, the money's coming together that gets it. They become your greatest cheerleaders and they help you, right? So they're helping you because, remember, 99% of the population is 1% of the 90% of the 9% of the wealth is 1% of the population, right? And so that money is they're limited partners in most of the funds. Well, they're concentrated in Silicon Valley. I had a German investor who's a very, very famous family in Germany tell me. I said, well, why don't you invest in German companies? He said, because I'm looking for higher valuations for the startups, and I invest my money there because I know that I'm going to get it, right? I'm going to get the kind of things that I want, and they're moving quickly. And so it's kind of a unique world. People try to recreate Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, Silicon this. It doesn't exist because you got Stanford University just like you have Cambridge, right? So you got Stanford University there, and they're really fostered on some of the brightest people from around the world coming to one place, working on technology with the dream of building a unicorn. And all of a sudden, it's like, the self-fulfilling prophecy. It just works. And, I've been doing it for 40 years. I've seen miracles happen. I mean, literally miracles, right? Um, and so that's the story behind it. And, it's interesting because there's so many really cool companies around the world. Today, I have 180 in my portfolio representing 73 countries around the world. There's all kinds of companies. The problem is they don't have a voice. They don't have, they're like Ferraris in a garage. They don't get the Ferrari out, right? It's one thing about getting out of the garage, another thing about winning the race. And so what do you need? The right pit crew, you need the right kind of tires, the right brakes, the right transmission. If somebody's already run the race a couple times, it's usually get sponsors and all those kind of things. It's kind of like winning a race, and it works, but it's not for everybody. It's just a different mentality. And, you know, and and then the VCs around the world, a lot of times they'll say they're doing when I did my seed round, I raised $7 million, right? And so that a lot of places would be an A, right? Nearing, and this is in 2016. So that would be nearing an A, but it wasn't an A in Silicon Valley. It was a seed round.
So, Gary, and the reason I said I don't understand it, I'll explain from my side, is I've watched Silicon Valley startups for 20 years in my space. Now, I'm very focused. It's clean tech, hardware, wind turbine companies, solar PV companies, and even people doing battery startups. And fundamentally, one technology always seems to win in each space. So if you look at wind turbines, horizontal axis wind turbines, they all look broadly the same. They all have the same transmission, and the same thing through the whole power sector: steam turbines, gas turbines, reciprocating engines. They're all fundamentally, very rapidly you end up focusing on one. And and I think you can have the best team in the world and the most amount of money, and you will fail if you have not got the right technology. So for me, I'm very much a technology first. If it's not going to has the potential to be up there in the number one, number two spot, as in the technology, I don't think you can put a really great team with it. And the sort of example I would give is if you had the best team in the world with wave energy, you will not, wave energy has been broadly a colossal failure for lots of good engineering reasons. But I think you could put the most amount of money in the best team there and it still isn't going to work. So and the reason I always get, and I still think people tend to overlap a lot of software and other technologies that do work and can scale very rapidly, and companies can pivot. But when you're in hardware, it's very hard to change from one hardware solution to another. It's not remotely easy if the team aren't set up for it and you haven't got the right. So I have and that's why I say I don't necessarily understand it, because I if you look at them in my space, there's 20 companies around the world, let's say. They all have very, very different technical approaches. My view is there's going to be one or two, maybe three winners, and everybody else is going to fail because they have.
Yeah, they do. But what happens, James? Remember the way it really works is that you get the right kind of money, and I see it time and time and time again. Look at my friend Jensen, right, from NVIDIA. In 1993, started out with gaming boards for the PC. Now he's, GPUs, and he's dominating the AI space. I mean, literally. And I've had conversations in his office, right, a few years ago. And so what happens is these companies pivot because they get incredible boards together. They get incredible investors. And what they're doing is continuously sensing the market, and they're making those changes based upon where they think the market's going to go, a year and a half, 2 years out. And they're actually helping the company, guiding them to the direction it should be, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like the Pygmalion effect, the self-fulfilling prophecy. What happens is as you start to build it, you're building it like what people want to see. Then the investors start piling in. All of a sudden, you got a boatload of money. You got really smart investors in there that help guiding you, and the ship turns in that direction. I see it times. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. It's time and time and time and time again. It's I had Daniel Kotke, one of the original Apple team members, on my show recently. The head of the quantum lab at Harvard on my show, just a lot. I've done 1,400 of these with people just like yourself, and Nobel Prize winners, but I hear it time and time again. And so the problem is most people don't understand it. 90% of building a unicorn is a storytelling, right? It's not the product or service. And if you go to take that course at Stanford, you'll have time and time again from people that have actually built those unicorns, whether it's hardware or software. It's storytelling. And the problem is the magic of the story is what wins, because you got to captivate the audience. Most people don't think of that. They think about if you have a product, everybody's going to buy it. Most of the engineers I deal with, and I deal with them from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, Cambridge, all over the world, IIT, but they're the same. It's not about the product. It's about the story when it comes up. So if you have a powerful story that resonates and people can feel it, internalize it, it wins. And I've seen it so many times. I saw one of my companies, they wanted to raise a little over 10 million, end up raising 25 million. And the reason was they built a very powerful story around what they have. And it was a hardware company recently too.
And when you say hardware, can I ask, do you mean computer hardware or physical hardware?
No, it was medical technology hardware, which kind of like what you have. It's very specialized, right? And but they did do some pivoting. They did end up making their story very enchanting, and it worked.
Well, would you like to hear the story? Well, I should tell you the story then, shouldn't I?
yeah. So go down. I wanted to ask you some questions. What was the inspiration behind founding Caldera, and why is decarbonizing industrial heat so critical for the global sustainability?
So the I would say the insight was we did a lot of the insight was I said with the previous company we were looking to take electricity, store it as heat, convert it back to electricity, and there were two insights from that. One of them was a lot of applications. If the storage is too expensive, you simply don't bother. You're better off actually building. And the aim is of it. So the starting point is when you add a lot of wind and solar to the grid, you get a lot of periods of surplus hours. We're starting to see it sort of globally become, let's say, an issue for grids to manage. And so we need to create demand that you can turn on at certain periods. So that's the sort of the driver. It's really about how do you soak up surplus energy that gets wasted. Now, if you're going to do this, and this industrial heat is really interesting because it's 25% of all the energy used in the world. It covers a huge range of temperatures. The bit we're interested in is like 10% of all the energy used in the world. But you've got blast furnaces operating at 1500 Celsius. I'm sorry, I don't do the Fahrenheit numbers. But we're interested in the sort of lower temperature bit up to sort of 200 Celsius. And it's about, as I said, it's about 40% of all industrial heat, 10% of global carbon emissions. And it's really sort of key because it's a very big source of demand that's currently powered by fossil fuels. So all of these companies have giant gas boilers, maybe oil in certain parts, even coal in parts of the world. And the really interesting thing about them is they normally use them to generate steam for these industrial processes. And you can substitute what I call electric heating using surplus at certain periods and then switch back to gas and switch back to hybrid. And there are very few things that you can do this with where the customer doesn't have to change their behavior. And one of the things that we see is that customers don't want to change how they behave. You have to offer them really quite big incentives to move from charging their car at certain times to charging at others. But these big factories, if you offer them electricity, which is going to get thrown away for less than their fossil fuels, they will very happily use it. They're all worried about their scope 1, scope 2 emissions. They really want to do this. And at the moment, we have a slightly crazy system where the electricity markets often make it very more expensive. It's actually cheaper to throw it away than it is to use it in certain cases. So to me, industrial heat is this really key decarbonization sector that allows us to transition slowly, because as you add more wind turbines, we get more hours of surplus generation. So now you want some things that soak it up. This drops the number of surplus hours, and then you can build more wind turbines. And you have to build the two sort of level together. And you can't just build all wind and solar, because otherwise you just start throwing it away and everybody gets unhappy. And if you have too much demand, then the price never goes low enough, so you're not going to substitute. So it offers the system a huge amount more flexibility than pretty much anything else that's available. Because beyond electric vehicles, I'd see very few sources of flexible demand. Yes, we can fit batteries, but they're broadly to store electricity and discharge it back to the grid. But if you want to actually see flexible demand, there's very few, apart from, to my mind, heat and industrial heaters. It's simpler. It's sort of also simpler for the grid because these are companies that have big energy requirements. So rather than having to have 1 million homes switching an electric water heater on and off, you could have 10 factories and have the same impact.
And so what's the deal with, tell me, do you have real life cases of where you've done this? And so tell me like the order of magnitude. So one factory would do what? What could I do with that heat?
So one factory would do, let's say, 20 gigawatt hours a year of gas. This is a food factory, let's say, making food products or drinks. And so that's 20,000 megawatt hours. Your home in the UK might do 10 megawatt hours of heating. So it's roughly 2,000 homes, or one factory would be a good example. Now that's at the sort of low level. If you went up to something like an alumina refinery, you're using, I'd have to do the gigawatt hour number, it's pretty huge, but they'll be using 300 megawatts of steam 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So in that scenario, you're talking, you're wanting to have massive. So the factory I talked about is relatively small compared to something like an alumina refinery. And there's around, I think it's 160 of those in the world. And they all use steam at relatively low temperatures, a really easy opportunity to start to decarbonize and to hybridize. So those are the sort of ranges where you go from petrochemicals refineries down to factories. We have a sort of cutoff at a certain level where below it, it's just not enough energy for us to be involved.
So give me a scenario and tell me how it works in terms of your customer. Who's your customer and how would it work?
So give an example. We've got tend to be in our case tend to be food and beverage. They have strong European-based customers. They've got a strong focus on decarbonisation. Often they've done certain steps along the way to decarbonisation. So I would describe their sort of new customers and, let's say, new build factory and retrofit. New build, what we're seeing is people want to fit heat pumps into the system. So there's a lot of opportunities to reuse heat. And you can get really good, what are called COPs. So you put 1 unit of electricity in, you get 3 or 4 units of heat recycled within the process. That works really well. There's a thing with heat pumps, so they don't tend to like to load follow, and they're quite expensive. So you don't want to put them in if you just need some heat for 50 or 100 hours a year.
Well, I mean, the other thing is they're extremes, right? You can't, with a heat pump, there's only so much you can get, right? If it gets too cold, they don't really work. They're not efficient.
Correct. So and at startup, they tend to take a while. They often want a heat source to help start. So one of the reasons the company that invested in us for Series A is they do high temperature heat pumps, and they see our solution very complementary to them, to how you build an entire factory. And so you can go to somebody who's a large food or drinks production person and give them a completely electric solution with a price running cost that's similar to gas. So that is a sort of, and it's easy to do that on I would say, when you're building a new factory, because you can put everything in the right place. It's actually quite hard to fit heat pumps into older factories, because often the heat that you want to recycle is in the wrong place, and you can't necessarily get it to the right place for where you want to use it. So in those scenarios, we tend to come in, and I would say you were looking to hybridize the heating. So they might be installing a large amount of behind the meter renewables. They might have access to some ancillary services, and we're not trying to do the whole thing in one go. To me, it's, it can be done. It tends to be, without heat pumps, it tends to be very expensive. So often we tend to come in and do part of the decarbonization, and we're sort of positioning them. And I say to everybody, it's a transition. It's called a transition for a reason. As you get access to more cheap electricity, you can effectively afford to change your strategy. But we often recommend people keep both the gas and the electric in together, so they have the ability to switch between fuels.
And who's your customer then?
So our customers, first customer we've got is a hospital. Haven't publicized that yet, so it's going out shortly. But we generally would find it's people, well-known names that you would know in the food and drinks industry. So in the same brewers, these are the sort of people that we're talking to and looking to deploy on. And I would say, generally consumer-facing goods seem to have the most push. Also because I think in their case, they're often trying to decarbonize. They said we're going to do it by 2030 or 2035.
Got it. Listen, we're coming to the top of this show. So closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you, James?
So closing thoughts are, if it's all right, I'll just have a little bit about Caldera. So we haven't really we've talked a lot about the sector, but we build what we call an electric storage boiler for a very simple reason. It can work as an electric boiler, and we've integrated storage within it. And we can place these things outside your factories next to your big steam boilers, and we can integrate them in. If you want to get in touch with us, website's www.caldera.co.uk. We are focused on European companies predominantly at the moment. We aren't going in the US. That's a couple of years away on our milestone. So if you're a European company, or based in your factory in Europe, very happy to talk. We run modeling for you. We help you work out what the payback is. Generally, we see it can be single digit paybacks for a lot of people, so 5-7 years. And what we find is if it's longer than about 10 years, it's often quite hard to sell the business case. So we're very focused on giving people good returns on investment. But talk to us, because often you find you go through the modeling a couple of iterations before we settle on what is the best solution for you.
And what's the best way to get a hold of you?
It'll be literally drop an inquiry through the website or drop me a note on LinkedIn. Always very happy to answer on LinkedIn. I spend quite a lot of time on there, I suspect, like yourself, and always very interested in inquiries from people. And I would say that the number is, if you spend around £1.5 million, so over $2 million a year on electricity and gas, then it'd be an interesting conversation.
Sounds great. James, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. And thanks to all my audience for joining one more time. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. This is Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And we'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, James, and thanks, everybody.